The topic's time. If you had more time, what would you do?
I guess I'll go then.
Okay.
No one else is jumping at the bit. So one of the things that kind of helped us make the change is time itself. So when I came back to the farm, I was in my 20s, and respecting that my dad was in his 60s. We were on kind of two different ends of the spectrum, and realizing that things take time. Hopefully I had 50 years to help implement and learn and things like that. And to be honest, I really wish my dad would have started sooner and I could have learned from him, because we were starting with a fresh plate. And so I kind of look at the experience out there, and that's probably one of the best gifts you can give to your children, or the younger generation that you're working with, is to spend time with them at events like this, time in the field, teach them kind of what happened 30 years ago, what you've saw. And I've kind of had to learn the hard way with that. So like fence rows, tree rows, shelter belts. I grew up picking up every tree that blew down that was dead. And I'm like, this is waste. Like, why are these things here? And then it took me years to really realize why, when you go to other parts of Canada and stuff like that. So, sharing that knowledge that you guys have over the last 40, 50 years to that next generation would help save a lot of time. And I really wish, like, there's lots of things I learned from my parents, but I didn't realize it was essential to this, the regen movement and how they did it and why they did it. But I think if I could have more time, it would be being more aware when I was younger, because I wasn't really aware of observing. And now I wish, I'm like, oh, I wish I could go back when I was 21 and I could do this differently, or I'd pay attention to this and that, and kind of help save mistakes, I guess, that I made. So
I took your question as if we had more time up here.
That could be. I don't know.
We're hitting all cylinders here. That was an easy one. No one else was talking, so
You know what, I'm gonna, if I had more time, I would have talked more about ranching like a 12-year-old, because there are a whole pile of people that I've talked to in the homesteading movement who are very competent. They're professionals. They have this great idea of raising their kids healthy, so they start homesteading. In 3 or 4 years, they're so exhausted, they're beat up, they're on the verge of depression. They're I don't know. I know on one hand, at least that many people who burst into tears talking about this. And they're wondering, well, how, it seems like everybody else can do it. Why can't I do it? And the reason being is because we set, and when I say we, I remember in 2000, setting things up so that we're working from dawn to dusk. We don't have time. We're not raising our kids the way that we want to be raising them, because it just work. And it doesn't take very many years, and all the money that you come back with, myself included, start farming with, is gone, and it's not a lot of fun, and we don't talk about that. Just, has anyone heard me on any podcasts? Okay, well, the rest of you, you're dead to me. But the funny thing about these podcasts, invariably, I go onto a podcast, and I said, well, we really should talk about this, about how to get your labor down, and we don't talk about it very much, and then we start talking about grazing in a sweet spot. If we don't get our labor down, people are going to get burnt out, and they're going to leave, and someone else is going to come on that land. And the other thing that I talk about in my book is there's two parts of labor. One is just the physical part, the economic part, but the other part is the amount of mental energy that it takes. So when you are exhausted, when I say you, I mean me, because I remember going to bed knowing that there was these opportunities to rent land, but I'm exhausted and I just want to go to bed. I want to sleep. So then I'm missing these opportunities. But when I started asking the question, can a 12-year-old do this? And I still ask myself that everything I do, even today, can a 12-year-old, I ask that question, can a 12-year-old do this? And if they can't, I stop it, or I change it, or I stop it. And once I started doing that, it's amazing we had way more time. You know, like I talked, by 2007, we were running 3,000 yearlings. Myself and 1 or 2 summer students, we had 6 hours of work between the 2 of us. So we had plenty of time to go to the lake, or, well, we did a lot of poker playing with my older neighbors in the community, but we'd, we'd go team roping in the evening, and, we're doing things with our kids. Whereas when we had 70 hogs and we had 50 ewes, and, we were custom grazing 80 cow-calf pairs, we didn't have time to do any of that. So if I had more time on the stage, that's what I would talk about.
Okay, well, there's pros and cons to being the last guy to turn your mic on. There's two really different and interesting perspectives. And I'll take it in a slightly different direction. Time is, in my mind anyways, it is the most valuable thing that we have. You cannot buy more time. We can always make more money, but you can't buy your time back. So time is time management. Sometimes some people think that's a bit of an oxymoron. You can't manage time. You can only manage yourself. And I think that trying to boil that all back to making clear and fairly clear decisions. Something else that I thought of or forgot to mention, I think, when I was chatting with you folks, is as I look out at the room and I see a whole array of folks. There's some people who are further down the path, some people just starting, and people with the experience, like Mike was saying. And the thing that really excites me now is seeing these younger producers coming up who have their dads were early adopters in this stuff and doing these different things, and then they'll see where they're taking their business, right? It's just like, okay, it's a totally different set of eyes. And they're not necessarily having to bring a whole bunch of change to the operation. All they're having to do is come to the operation, and they're going to make changes, or they'll probably make some changes, but where they're starting from is way further down the journey. And I think that's a real cool thing. And I think that's good, Mike.
Are we wildly outside of what the agenda was for this discussion, or what? Where's Duncan? We're good? We're good? Okay. Okay. I would just make a small comment and then we can, time. I think of like biological time, and if you think about, when you have a group of producers working together, you think of each individual producer, you have like X number of years that you're going to have a chance to farm, right? You have like at bats. If you have a long career as a farmer rancher, you maybe get like 50 at bats. It's not a whole lot, right? But if you have a group of producers, you like speed up biological time because you can share all the wisdom and learning and things that worked and didn't. So you're speeding up time by working together. Or coming to an event like this, if you think about like a valuable use of time, you're learning, right? Like what could be more important? You can now avoid making some mistakes so that those at bats, you're hitting like 300 instead of 100. So I would say, you should, everyone who's here, this is a valuable use of your time to learn. And this is how you make your farm better and speed up biological time. So thank you.
I'll just add one thing. Rob, I'm gonna throw you under the bus. You mentioned about like time and being efficient with time, right? But I find producers, when you start talking, everyone wants to do and everyone wants to talk about what they like. But when we get into the weeds, it's like, well, what aren't you good at? What is your weakness? And everyone's like, don't want to talk about it, right? We've always done it this way. And so I think, you know, maybe as Rick's presentation, when he said you have to be comfortable with change, have to be uncomfortable, being uncomfortable, doing new things. I think that's really what pushes the envelope. And, you know, I try not to shy away from problems, but I know even myself, there's things I'm not good at, but often those things that we aren't good at, we've avoided or stuck our head in our sand, or we've looked, you know, someone else to do the work, but typically those have great returns because we haven't implemented them, we haven't talked about them, and we're scared to. So anything that is like a touchy subject or a tough conversation, typically those are the conversations or things you need to do the most to add value to your existing operation, right? And it's just kind of recognizing that and pushing yourself and getting the team to push yourself on, well, what about this, Rob, or what about that, or, you know, certain parts of the operation. And I haven't met one guy yet that is perfect at everything, you know, so it's okay to not be an expert at everything, but bringing in people to your team, right, to help you with whether it's a number side. So, you know, I used to give marketing presentations, and I'd go to a room like this and I'd say, how many people here like green marketing and numbers? You get like one guy. And I'm like, well, at least you come to the right place, because if you don't like it, maybe we can help you. But, you know, oftentimes people don't like the number side. I know my dad, he had to, you know, change oil on the tractor, go get books ready for the accountant. He was gone. Like it just, he liked working with his hands and being outside. But you can't avoid those other pieces of the farm that are crucial to your success, because you could grow a really good crop, but if you suck at marketing it, you've just, everything you gained on that side, you've lost. So kind of that holistic management approaches have to be good at everything.
I guess I can keep the conversation going here. To that point, I think you made a really good point, Mike, is you can hire people to do this. And if there's something that you know is critical to getting done, you know, let's just, and you don't want to do that job, it makes a lot of sense to get that job looked after. And I find that usually when you do that, the person that's doing that job is pretty good at it, or they like it. It's kind of in their wheelhouse and they can excel at that. And they can sometimes get it done, well, not sometimes, generally get it done cheaper and more efficiently than what you're able to do. Yeah.
Yeah, because how many people actually value your time, right? Like if we work 20 hours a day, every day, you know, what's the value of your time? So that's stuff that you know, a job that it might take you 6 hours, but it takes me an hour. You know, is it worth it for you to just hire that out, or vice versa, right? So, you know, I think that's one thing we're getting better at. You know, Tom, you had opportunity costs in there for grazing and different things like that. Are we using real numbers when we're doing our cost of production? Are we just kind of using, you know, numbers for land is super low because it's paid for, right? Or are we using real land values, rental values in our cost of production numbers? That's key, because, you know, sitting down with producers and going through that, depreciation is one that most people don't count. Land rent is another, and salaries. You know, so those three things can really dictate whether you're profitable or not. And depending if you're a brand new farm or you're, you know, 4th generation, 5th generation, that can really determine if you're actually making money or not.
Yeah, I could jump in here. So I came from the oil patch. My parents had a trucking company, but I also had oil field company. And when I was calculating, you know, bidding on a job, I used the rental rate, you know, and I tacked on some, you know, I think it was 15% above a piece of equipment that I could rent. Because even though if I owned that equipment, I needed to know if this was going to work to expand. And I think of it in the same way, like when, like swath grazing as an example, when I'm calculating those figures, I put land rent in. And actually where I'm at right now, they're actually pushing me to put in a 5% return on land value. And I've never had to do that before. But you know what? It really is challenging me. Can because I work for a Hutterite colony right now, and they're challenging me to, they want a return on their asset. So then, you know, I'm pretty sure it's like 5%. So that's the number that I'm using now when I'm doing my calculations. Is this swath grazing, is it meeting its target? Because in our area there at Wetaskiwin, land rent is $110. So that's what I've been using. And it's swath grazing is pretty easy to hit that target. But now it's a lot more challenging, you know, so it's whatever you're used to. But I honestly think those numbers are important to find out, can we expand? Because has anybody taken ranching for profit in here? Okay, so you know, the two ways to, three ways to increase profit. Your gross margin, and the big one is turnover. So if you don't know that this enterprise, if it's, you don't know if it's working or not, it's difficult to make a good decision. Should we expand? Because if it's not making money, what's the point of expanding that operation? But boy, if it is making some good coin, let's give her, see how much land we can rent. That's my thinking anyways.
So is the plan to break out into, no, okay. Yeah, okay. Okay, questions? Okay.
Hey, so talking about different enterprises on your farm, I'm just curious on each of your operations, how often would you evaluate the enterprises that you're doing to see if they still make sense in your current context?
I can answer that. Very, very regularly. Like someone asked me, how often are you looking at like comparing price relationships in the cattle market with the wholesale by marketing thing? And I said, it just depends on the season, like what's going on. And if we're getting ready, do we, you know, do we need cash flow? Okay. Yeah, it's fall, there's bills to be paid. What are we gonna sell? So kind of comparing it that way. And then anytime, I really enjoy just thinking about trying to find opportunities and then throwing that spaghetti on the wall and then seeing what sticks. And as you do that, it kind of subconsciously challenges what I'm currently doing, and spend a fair amount of time doing that, because it's just no fun if you could be 6 months is a lot of time, right? And a lot can change in that 6 months. So anytime you're thinking of something new, it's a great time to kind of, and it doesn't have to be a great big deep dive every time, but just to evaluate where you're at is very important, I think.
On the grazing side, I evaluate at the end of the grazing season. I have I created a spreadsheet, and I have all the formulas in there, and I just take the information off my grazing chart, and I plug it in there, and it comes right out, and it tells me how many stock days per acre for each paddock, and then how much revenue I generated per acre. So in terms of grazing, I do that at the end of the grazing season, every grazing season.
So strictly green guy, the markets trade five days a week. So I'm looking at it every day, you know, is canola up or down or wheat up or down? Kind of just a quick glance. Kind of every week I go through is like, okay, am I doing anything next week? Or, you know, going through the cash flow kind of thing at like at least once a week. At the end of harvest, I do kind of, here's the prices now. Here's where my profitability is as of today with what I've sold, what I got in the bin. Am I profitable? What's my ROI today? And then what's the carrying cost to wait until January or February, and using interest rates that have loans on to kind of compare that side. So I look at it quite often, but I think for me, one thing that has really changed is the volatility in the markets. You know, one tweet here, one tweet there, it changes. And the last phone call I want to make is to my parents to say, I didn't manage the farm properly, I can't pay it back. So it's my responsibility as an owner of their business. Essentially, they started to manage that risk. So, you know, I'm on top of that quite a bit. Same thing. In springtime, we do a real deep dive with crop insurance. Which ones layer where, what's their profitability outlook? Where's your backstop with insurance? So, you know, on that, we'll spend 2 days diving into that. And then inputs as well, like, you know, Rick said, you know, $2.7 million on a farm. You know, our farm isn't that big, but 3,000 acres, that's, you know, almost 500,000 that we're making decisions on, right, for fertilizer very easily. So doing those deep dives in the spring and fall really help us lay out the rest of the year, because you know, once you got your insurance, you know, we in Saskatchewan, we have until March 31st. You kind of know where you sit the rest of the year. And if a hailstorm comes or it's dry or it's too wet, it allows me to sleep at night knowing here's my backstop. So I find that's one area that, you know, I'll talk to buddies on my hockey team and they're like, so what are you doing with crop insurance? I'm like, oh, probably do this. And I go, what about you? Well, what I did last year. And I'm like, oh, what's that? I don't know, because dad picked it out, right? And I'm like, you're running a multi-million-dollar farm and you don't know what kind of insurance you take? Oh yeah, it's not really my thing. And I'm like, again, hire someone out to spend the 2-3 hours, because you know it's a big difference. Like at the end of the day, if you have one of those back in 2001 years or back in whatever years, right? So
I can just one quick comment to that. I found that the ROI, the return on your time, the return on investment of the time spent, kind of evaluating things it can be a very large return, right? It's definitely time well spent.
I'll be specific to Tom there, a comment and question. So yeah, so watching Tom speak up there, it's kind of like, for me, it was like watching the movie. Even though the movie was great, the book has more detail. So I encourage everyone, like, it's a really great book and it just goes more into detail with what he said. You talked about the tipping point. So what tools are you using for getting there? Like, are you breaking land, or is it just grazing management, or what are your tools?
So the first thing I do is use the grazing chart, because I need to know what I have there. And it's really, in my experience, it takes about 3 years to really know what you have. And it takes 3 years to get the soil biology working well. Because what I find the first year, okay, you know, once I get the grazing under control. And again, when I say get grazing under control, I mean never violate the rest period and never violate the graze period. My 2 cardinal rules. And when I do that, okay, the first year, we're, you know, do all right. Second year, better. And a lot of times there's infrastructure improvement that has to happen. So that first year, you know, I'm run off my butt, off my feet, I should say, getting this infrastructure in place so that grazing can become easy. So then year 2 becomes easier, but at the same time, the soil biology is growing. And then by year 3, there's this explosion. Now, if this explosion of grass does not hit the tipping point by year 3, now we have to do something. We need some other input. The land needs some help. A fantastic tool that will, in 1 year, can go 400% to 600% increase. And that's, you know, a lot of times that's what we need. We don't need 70 or 100% increase, because it's like the ranching for less loss idea. We're doing better, but we're still not where we need to be. We need a 400 to 600-fold increase. Bale grazing does that. The issue with the bale grazing is that limited to how many acres you can do in 1 year. I think a lot of people know know who Steve Kenyon is. So Steve and I have been buddies since I think 2001. We've been on a very similar path. And it was, I think about maybe 10 years ago, we sat down and calculated how many acres can we do in a year. And what it worked out to, with 100 cows for 100 days, you can improve 13 acres. That's all you can improve. And a lot of times we need more acreage than that. Now, I have used fertilizer. Fertilizer that I don't know much about fertilizer, but I hired this fellow agronomist, and he gave me a whole list of things, and I said, I'm not going to do that. What's the biggest bang for the buck? And he said ammonium sulfate, and it was 200 pounds of ammonium sulfate. So that's what I did, but I also put red clover in there, and I've had fantastic results with that. Except for this year, I suggested, because I got this quarter and it has been beat up for 30 years. So you can imagine what kind of grass there was. And I said, you know what, could we just try on these 2 paddocks? So it worked out to, I think, 13 acres altogether. Could we try ammonium sulfate? Because I've had great results. And what I was thinking was that in that area, I know in the seed bank, there's a whole pile of L-site clover. And the agronomist who taught me about, using ammonium sulfate, ammonium sulfate, he said, let's feed the clovers, and the clovers or the legumes, and the legumes will feed the grass. And like I said, I've had great results. I didn't this year because there was hardly any legume. It's in the soil, in a seed form. The places that I've had good results is where I actually had legumes. It was just really weak. And the ammonium sulfate had exploded, and it became positive cascade. It started with the clover, and then the grass came. So I'm still toying with things. I have gone down a lot of rabbit holes. I've heard amazing results. Like, as an example, there was a trial done in California, I forget how many years ago, and they were talking, they used compost, and the amazing results. Okay, well, what were the numbers? Oh, I don't know, but it was really good. Okay, but what were the numbers? And I actually had to go down the rabbit hole, and I had to go and read the 3 papers that were published on that, from that trial. The increase was 70%. Significant, right? But if they're starting at 20 stock days per acre, and let's say just for argument and quick math, they did 100% increase. They're at 40 stock days per acre. The tipping point's here. They're not even nudging it. Yes, 70% or 100% sounds amazing, but they're not where they need to be. They're not even at the starting point, and there's no way they can get way up here to what's possible. So I don't have a lot of tools. The ultra high density, that's a tool I use quite regularly, but I just use it as a tool, not as a management strategy. And the other thing that I find works very well is, in my experience anyways, is the multi-species. And it doesn't work in a leader-follower situation. I've only had the amazing results when they're all together. And actually creating a mob so that all of these animals, they know this is these are their animals that they belong to. And in my book, well, you've read my book, so there's numerous incredibly awesome anecdotes about all the things that happen once you put all these different species together. Did I answer that pretty good? You know, I'm still learning. There's only, I don't have as many tools as I would like because I'd like to have more that I can really ramp this up faster. And honestly, I don't. I'm limited. Yeah. And you know what? It takes 3 years. And the biggest one that I have found, the most effective tool is the grazing chart as a planning tool, not as a recording tool. Is that good enough?
Hello. Hi. This question, Mike Thiele, I'm going to give to you, okay? Because you've been such a champion, and I mean this in a very flattering way. You've been the face of Regen Ag. You've been on this file for quite some time. You've had, I'm sure everyone in this whole entire room has been to one of your field events. And this is our 8th anniversary of our Regenerative Ag Conference. And you were out in front of it 8 years ago. And what have you seen next? Or what have you seen since? And where's your optimism?
How did you say that? What
What do you
You're-
see
you're-
next?
do I
Or
see next?
What have you seen in 8 years, and what
What have
has you optimistic?
Well, optimistic is, I guess I say, probably everyone's heard me probably say it to anyone I talk to. I think, regenerative ag is the fastest growing segment of prairie agriculture. I don't think there's any doubt about it. It's of course starting small, but it's just exploding. And if you think about it like a curve on a chart, I think it's just sort of, there's the graph and we're sort of down here and it's just, about to take off and go exponential. I think, I can't predict the future, but so I'm super optimistic. I said to someone, I think at lunch, that the criticism that comes back sometimes is, this regenerative thing's just a fad, it'll go away. That's like saying that biology will just go away, right? 500 years of our best scientific understanding of how the world works is just going to go away. Like they're just not understanding what is, like I think regenerative ag it's basically biology and ecology. It's sort of understanding how nature functions and using that, mimic that in how we do agriculture. Like how can that not be the future? So I think that's where we're going. How that all plays out, of course, is unknown. I think we take what works. Like it doesn't have to be an either or. We take what has worked, right? We don't have to like pick our team and fight to the death. You're not like, so, things that have worked. The problem is like, how do you define what has worked? Like if you think like globally, how we've been able to feed a lot of people, and that's been great, and I've been one of them. I've never been hungry a day in my life. It's wonderful, of course, but there have been unintended negative consequences. So some things are not working. We just need to understand and take what's worked and then add on. So if you think the green revolution has basically been a focus on chemistry, fertilizer, herbicides, fungicides, those are super powerful tools. So take, our understanding of all that, use them responsibly because they are powerful tools that can have, good or negative unintended consequences. And then add on now biology so that we have kind of a complete understanding. We're looking at the whole, not just focusing on chemistry. And so I think about regenerative ag as like a decision-making framework, right? And some people here, that we've kind of worked together, and you understand what I'm trying to say is that, like you have to make a decision. How do you decide what to do? Well, at least with the soil health principles, you can sit down and go, hey, am I following the principles? Am I minimizing disturbance? Am I keeping a green plant growing? Am I adding diversity? And from that, you should probably make better decisions. And then add in understanding ecosystem function, energy cycle, water cycle, mineral cycle, all that good stuff. And that should make our farms better and more profitable. So I don't know, is that an answer, Duncan? All right, okay, thank you. Next.
Yeah, I'd like to address to any of the panelists with regards to our management crop insurance or your provincial crop insurance. Is there any roadblocks or impediments that is in place now that you'd like to see changed with regards to regen ag and grazing? I know crop insurance is working, that model's there, but I think it's doing a poor job with regards to regen and then the beef industry. Specifically, the LPI, yeah, what are your thoughts?
Is there anyone from Manitoba Crop Insurance here? Okay, we gotta be careful. So I'll speak about Saskatchewan. So we've kind of ran into some roadblocks with some of the insurance we've had because, you know, the forage coverage, you know, being a grain guy, I didn't ever really look into it and yeah, check the box. Yeah, I'm going to seed forages. And after 3 years of seeding that, I had an establishment claim. It was the year that we didn't have any snow. The guy came out and goes, yeah, you're in a claim. This is bad. Go, okay. We get down to the details and I technically wasn't supposed to have coverage because I seeded a cocktail mix that had 10 species, not 1 or 2. And I said, well, this doesn't make any sense. I paid 3 years for this coverage and now you're telling me that, you know, this is not there. And so we end up going through a pilot claim and we've ran into a couple of these situations. But, you know, I think too, understanding, I have a little bit of a background with insurances. The reinsurers are looking for different things as well, and they need data. And so I think when it comes to regen ag and things like that, you know, this is where as farmers, we could help with those agencies to help show them some data. So, you know, I can get coverage for monocrop peas. I can get coverage for monocrop oats, different rates, different coverages. And when I try and seed the two together, no, we can't do that. And I go, well, why not? It's, you know, take it 50-50. Well, our reinsurers just won't allow that basically. And so they need to see data on that. And I think that's going back to some of the things that we can do as producers is share that data. Same thing with faba beans. You know, it was a monocrop, but I've never grown faba beans before, so I had to seed that crop uninsured. You know, and for me, it was you know, trying to get rotation, get a pulse in. I took on that risk, but it also limits my ability to go seed more of that crop or adopt these practices quicker. So I think from a provincial standpoint, we need to say, well, how quickly do we want to move agriculture forward? What policies or what kind of insurance tools can we change to drive that? I know on the insurance side, I work with a number of CPGs, and that's one of the things that we've identified as a barrier is, you know, would you pay for the insurance for the farmer to try these new things? But again, building that into some of these programs that are coming out, and there's a lot of interest in that because they continue to see this being a barrier going forward. Because when you start looking at whole farm policy versus field policy, there's, you know, egg stability, whole farm. Okay, so if I try 2 quarters, it's going to just, you know, could potentially bring me down. But if I had insurance on that, that was separate, it might drive adoption. And then I think the private sector, and I think Kim maybe talked about this, like the green bonds and the interest from other organizations is starting to creep into the insurance and programs, things like that. And I think there's opportunity there. It's just how do we structure that it works for the farmers, works for the insurance companies and the reinsurers as well, as well as their investors, and kind of understanding that. So, you know, complex, but I think there's room for improvement. And I think, to be honest, Rob, it's the younger generation has a different level of risk than the more experienced generation, right? When it comes to this kind of stuff. And sometimes we make that is we want to do this because it's different from our fathers. We want to put our own stamp on it, right? And whether it's doing infrastructure or doing different things, it's that sense of pride for that next generation. But again, unfortunately, when you start out as a new farmer, your coverage is low. Even if you farmed with your dad or whatever, if you want, you know, you break out separate on your farm, you're going with the area average, right? So I'd like to see that change when it comes to crop insurance too, is how do you put a grade or a score on Rob's management practice versus my management practice versus the guy that goes and hangs out at the bar till 2 o'clock in the evening every day, but yet we farm in the same area. You know, we're coming to these conferences learning. If you look at other professions out there, you have continuing education credits. As a farmer, we don't have any continuing education credits, you know, like, but there's some people farming right next door to me that have never been to a meeting and they get the same coverage as me. So, you know, where is that willingness to learn? Again, I really applaud Manitoba Crop Insurance for that discount that they announced here last night, and I think that's a start. But again, like how do you measure management practices and that for the younger generation coming on?
Yeah, that I agree with everything you said, Mike. I think it's a little over my hair, but anyways, I'm gonna come at this from a slightly different perspective. And I'll start the statement off with crop insurance as a tool. It's a risk mitigation tool. And I still use crop insurance. I understand that. I also do believe that crop insurance is hindering adoption of these practices because as you go down this path, all of a sudden you don't have crop insurance, and maybe the producer himself is fine with that, or that operation's okay with that. But all of a sudden the lender finds out, or even in some cases, the landowner finds out that you don't have crop insurance. Like, whoa, back up. This is scary, right? So that I think, and I don't want to get into the weeds of it all, but it is a bit of a safety net. And we kind of that's a little bit of an unfair advantage to all of agriculture producers. We're getting our insurance subsidized, and I've been working towards self-insuring and just really evaluating the crop insurance that we take. And I used to do the forage insurance, and then I just realized, or I looked at it and I was like, how can I self-insure myself? And I decided I'm going to take that money for the premium, and I'm just going to buy hay every year with it, or buy feed for it with it, and carry that over. And then all of a sudden it's just a little bit less. I also find that personally, when I explain things to crop insurance, I actually made a note on my phone and in my computer, a learning events note, that I am going next spring when I do my seeded acreage report, I'm going to get them to recite back to me what I just told them, because I tell them one thing and I swear up and down that I do it. And it comes to the end of the year and doing doing the production claim thing. And I'm like, yeah, that quarter I seeded it to grass, to perennials, and I cut it for green feed. And you cut it for green feed? That wasn't on the list. You didn't, you're out of scope here. You realistically, we don't have to give you any sort of claims or payouts or anything if indeed you are in that situation. And I said, well, this is news to me. I know, and when I did this in June, like, that field has been slated for green feed for the last 13 months. Like, I know that it's very tough to get that understanding. I do know some people from Saskatchewan Crop Insurance, and I'm sure there is in Manitoba, who are trying to wrap their minds around seeing things a little differently, and what are the effects that it's having. And I think we just need to be, as producers, we do need to be, instead of getting our feathers ruffled that, oh, this guy from crop insurance wants to know, taking offense to them, looking at our management, maybe, to saying like, okay, come and let's have a look at this and let's work through this, kind of a thing.
One thing too, Rob, is the flexibility. So like for us in Saskatchewan, it's March 31st. There's a lot can happen on markets and different things like that. So we actually had one quarter that was slated for forages. We put rainfall insurance on it. And then come May, we seeded part of that field to canola and part to forage. Well, on that piece that was seeded to canola, I couldn't change it because the rainfall insurance started in April or May, I forget, whatever it was. And so the flexibility too needs to be there. And the cattle guys, they got plan A, B, C, D, all the way to M, Z maybe. But as a grain guy, we have like our plan A, and we don't like plan B. And heaven forbid you say plan C, we're just going crazy, right? So that's another challenge with the crop insurance is that flexibility. Cause to be honest, it's easy to say, well, yeah, we're gonna start seeding May 7th, but what happens if you get 3 weeks of rain and that changes your seeding plan, right? And what does that look like? So you gotta list every single thing in there. But then it's like when it comes to the rainfall insurance, if it goes to forage, that was one thing that kind of this year we found out the hard way, but flexibility is key.
Michael, it sounds like you're close to getting cows. You're talking yourself into it.
No, no.
Yeah.
My wife bought a pair of cowboy boots. Still do not have a pair of cowboy boots, so.
Tom, you want to add to that insurance conversation or not? Yeah, okay, all right, okay, good. I would say, if you think about insurance, like what is true insurance? It's making your farm more resilient. There's still things that happen, great white combine and all that. But how do you make your farm more, like, truly more resilient so that you don't need insurance maybe at the same level? And that's how you manage your farm, right?
To that I can answer.
Okay, go ahead.
So my drought strategy is to manage my bush pastures. So what I do is I will concentrate the animals in there for at least once a year. And what I find, they'll open up the ground canopy. They'll tramp a lot of the old grass down. And then what I find happens is the forage in the bush paddocks start to really improve. And I purposely, even in good growing conditions years, I might not get there till August, but I purposely go in there and make a point of getting some of that understory knocked down, eaten, so that when things do get dry, there's my stockpile. That's, to me, that's my drought insurance, those bush pastures. And it's not just a willy-nilly thing. I do it very intentionally. I remember when I was grazing I started in 2000. And so 2000, 2001, and 2002, it was drought. That's where I learned how to graze. And someone was asking me at lunch, well, what happens? Okay, so you do not violate the rest period. You do not violate the grace period. I said, yeah. Well, what happens if you go around and you made a mistake on your rest period and you're coming back too soon? I said, 2001 to 2003, I did lots of that. I was just learning, but I could see that, at least 2 weeks in advance that I was going to be too early. So I did the county a favor. I was grazing ditches. I had polywire stretched out. I had I had a lot of polywire and grazing ditches, road allowances. Neighbor, I can really clean up your bush for you. There we go. Because usually when I made that mistake, I only needed 7 to 9 extra days. So a couple days here in this ditch, go on to the 3 days on that road allowance. I was able to do it. Now I'm much more experienced, so and because of that, I'm much more conservative in my estimates. But still, to this day, my drought insurance is the bush, and I don't have to pay for it.
I was just gonna say one more thing that kind of drives me nuts about the insurance is the whole stubble versus summer fallow. You have 2 different rates that are there. And even when you start looking at rotation, I don't know if, whatever, I'll say it. So you have a crop that if you grow one crop in 2004 and another crop in 2005. There's a lot of science that says it's not good growing a crop that starts with C and rhymes with anola. But yet you're not penalized on the insurance side. And that makes zero sense to me how that works, because we talk about clubroot, we talk about disease, different things like that. And I go, it just doesn't make sense. So really, it encourages guys, because lots of guys will say, well, my highest coverage is canola, so I'm going canola, and pushing that rotation. So again, that kind of goes back to the, how does it work for a guy who respects the rotation, does the proper thing, putting pulses in, versus a guy that's canola, snow. And we're advocating for proper rotation, but then there's no penalty for abuse of that, right? And so, you know, crop insurance made a change that a few years ago in Saskatchewan, if you actually had claims on that crop, your rates were adjusted. And that was nice to see, because we had guys abusing the system where it's, let's put, you know, our next era canola on our crappie is dirt, and then we're claiming it. And that kind of got rid of a lot of that stuff, because when the rates went to 35 bucks an acre, they go, okay, never mind, I'm not doing that anymore. But trying to encourage just good behavior on the rotation side. And I think, to be honest, you should have a discount if it's coming out of a biannual or perennial grass or something like that. And, you know, try and encourage that.
Next question.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, as probably many people are, just how much farming has changed. So it's mind-boggling, really. And I'm wondering, and one of the panelists and quoted Malcolm Gladwell talking about tipping points. And I'm wondering if there is a tipping point with regard to what I'm going to ask you about. If there is such a thing, are you far away from it? Or are we far away from it? What I'm getting at, and maybe this, anyways, what I'm getting at is, so many of you have talked so much about data, analytics, modeling, and so on. When I was a kid on the farm 40 years ago, you never heard stuff like that, talk like that. And then, of course, the way it's going, or the way it's gone, is the way it seems to me it should have gone, has to have gone. It's all about making farming better. Knowing more, as one of you said, or some of you said, you know more about, because you have data, because you do the analytics, because you do the modeling, and so on, you know more about what's going on in your farm than previous generations. And many of you have compared what you do and what you know compared to what your parents knew and did. But my question is, with regard to the collection of data of all sorts, markets, soil health, and so on, and analytics and modeling, with regard to the whole spectrum of things you have to deal with as a farming person, is there a tipping point where the rate of return, so to speak, on doing more of that starts to go down, starts to decline? That getting more data, doing more analytics, doing more modeling does not make things that much better, because you've reached that, what you've referred to as a tipping point.
I just have one comment, just to be clear. I started using the tipping point in 2008, significantly before Malcolm Gladwell wrote his book. So he actually probably quoted me. My perspective, you know, I was talking with Doug Ray last night, and he was talking about something similar, and how a lot of the things that are being done, the real driving force is the consumer. And, you know, we were talking, we don't really need policy if the consumer is becoming more educated, more want a particular type of food. As an example, where I'm working, they have a federally inspected plant, and they have their own beef label that is forage finished. They're doing 1,700 beeves under their own label. That's pretty significant. Like every week, 35 beeves that are finished on forage are being slaughtered there. And the only reason is because consumer wants that. So I feel it just seems like we're on the cusp right now of there's enough population that are demanding a certain quality of food. And for me, that I think we're getting close to there. Like I can't remember the gal that was on the panel yesterday. You know, she's been direct marketing for 13 years. To me, that's pretty darn impressive. You know, she mentioned like 150 families. That's one producer. We get there, you know, and the more that those 150 families start talking, you know, to their neighbor, it just builds, and I think we're on the cusp of that. Of course, I might be wrong. I said that 20 years ago when we were direct marketing, and you know, never quite happened.
I guess just briefly, I don't do a bunch of that, of the whole modeling thing. That's this guy's department. But I will say that we can collect so much data that we'll get paralysis by analysis and just be like, "Ooh," and actually see people just say, whatever. I just, you know, I don't want to know all of that. I just want the, you know, kind of some guidance, or I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing because I don't understand that. I mean, it could be an excuse or a roadblock. You know, looking at data is definitely it's amazing to see some of these things that Mike and those guys that are using these water probes are seeing, and it's a really, you know, it connects a lot of dots. It's like, aha, I knew I wasn't just telling myself a story, you know, because we're seeing very similar things. But you know, I think you've got to, if the data has a purpose and is useful and you can use that to make good decisions, I think it makes a lot of sense to collect it. But I do think you can get carried away and have a whole bunch of useless numbers that you're never really going to use. And maybe from a producer's perspective, it's different from somebody who is in that insurance side or the financial side. Maybe like they want to see a whole different set of numbers, right? So it's kind of wading through that, but I think you can definitely get carried away from my perspective.
I think that's a great question because, you know, my dad always asks, well, why do we need this? Why do we need that? And, you know, but at the same time, he's on Facebook for about 3 hours every day looking at random stuff, right? And I go, data or distraction? This world we live in, there's, you know, your phone pings when a snowstorm's coming up in Manitoba and the weather alert comes out. And so there's, in today's world, there's so many distractions from the apps on our phone. And I've actually shut a lot of those off so I don't get that. Because otherwise you go down that rabbit hole where you're, oh yeah, I just stared at my phone for 45 minutes and didn't do anything, right? So I think you have to be precise in, you know, what data are you looking at? And is there a reason? Like you said, if there's value, you have to go through that exercise to see if it works. It's, you know, no different than going through life and never checking your bank account balance. You know, I have to check my bank account balance. I have to check on things to make sure that I'm still doing good. I have to check the fuel in my fuel tank, right? It just doesn't come out of nowhere, and you have to make informed decisions. Do you need to move money into that account, or do you need to fill up the car? And so for me, data is what drives our engine in the farm in trying to make the best decisions. I know sometimes there's data that doesn't become relevant, but if you look at the data that we do have, it's helped me learn. It's helped me give confidence in some of these practices. Like I said, the cover crops, after 2 years, I was ready to throw it in the garbage because it was a drought. But then that moisture probe sold me on water holding capacity. And that completely changed it was an aha moment for me. So if I don't have that data there, I'm probably not growing cover crops because I would have quit in 2022, right? And so data has really helped me. And to be honest, I look at it and I go, okay, we're a 3,000 acre farm. What am I actually doing every single day? You know, when my dad grew up, they had chickens, they had pigs, they had cows, they had all that stuff. On my farm, we don't have that. When we haul grain for 2 days at a time. And then we're done filling that contract. Now I get that 20,000 acre guys have different logistical challenges and things like that, but are you using your time efficiently? Or are you just scrolling to Facebook and going down the rabbit hole and 3 hours later you're, oh, yeah, I gotta get stuff done. So for me, the data, I feel at least I'm trying to learn, trying to educate, working with the crop insurance and the lenders on educating. And here's my why. Here's the data that backs that up, and trying to move forward. So, but my farm has completely changed in the last 15 years. Like my sister left for Edmonton. We're seeding wheat and we're seeding canola. That's about all that's the same. You know, but the oats is different, the barley is different, the cover crops, the forages, the cattle, everything like that's changed. And, you know, I work with a lot of guys in the industry that go, oh yeah, I grew up on a farm 35 years ago in this little town. And I go, you know how much farming's changed in 35 years? It's changed a lot in my farm in 15 years, let alone 35, right? So, you know, there's a lot of education that needs to happen with, you know, salesmen and, you know, reps from companies that it's not, you know, the way we're using drones and different things like that. It's really changed. And just to be in the know of what farms are looking at now. And Michael, you could probably talk to this too, because you see a lot of data and things like that from research, but
Yeah, data, like you mentioned, Facebook. When you're on Facebook, what is Facebook collecting? Data on you. They know more about you than, I just may be getting off topic. But anyways, like it's data. Data is being collected. Like, you know, I read somewhere a while ago that you know, it was sort of a comment like whoever has the most data wins. This is sort of what it's, you know, data is more important than almost any other resource or money, because you can make decisions based on data. So it's super important. Of course, the model that you use determines how well the data is then interpreted. So we're running into some issues with that, like you know, garbage in, garbage out, and all that, and the models that are being used. But of course, data is going to, I don't know, continue to be important. I can't see how. But at the same time, like, you know, Blaine and I, understanding ag here in Canada, we also will say, you know, the data is fine, like, so you can measure change over time. But another useful tool, probably just as important as all that data, is to be observant on your own farm and just go out in the field with a shovel, and you should be able to determine if the past 5 years of your management has made a difference just by, you know, digging in the soil and seeing, you know, being observant. Like growing up, my dad, we never once, not ever, went out into the field with a shovel and kind of thought about whether we're making the soil better or not, right? We just weren't observant in that way. So I think it's a combination: data, observation, understanding, mindset. Like you say, your farm is different. You know what the biggest change on your farm probably is? Yeah. Yeah.
and I kind of look at data as, you know, it kind of coincides with technology too. And like Rob said in your presentation is, you know, that summer student doesn't just want to go put up fence and check water and that. They want to look, they want to count, they want to use data, they want to use technology on the farm. And it makes the farm sexy or fun for the younger generation. So, you know, eventually I'm very fortunate my dad still's helping out a lot on our farm, but I need to make it attractive for my kids to want to be a part of too. And they love data. They love the technology side too. So, you know, we're very fortunate. We have a lady that helps us on the farm, and she never grew up on the farm or anything. And she loves it because there's data that she looks at and puts together and things like that. And it helps her learn because she didn't grow up on a farm, right? So that we use the data as a learning tool to try and attract people to our farm as well. And you know, I've never heard a farmer say, well, maybe Tom, you said it about you had so much time you could go roping and go to the lake and that, but the other 99% of farmers are always, I don't have enough time. I need more help. Well, where do you find that help? You got to make the farm attractive. and look at data and look at technology for that next generation or that hired help to come. Cause you know, we're in a competitive world where the potash mines or the oil field or other businesses want that and they're using the technology. That younger generation thinks it's fun. You know, my kids want to fly drones. They want to be involved in that kind of stuff. So, you know, how do we utilize that to work with the next generation?
Oh, I got a grazing question. It's very specific relative to the other questions. Just I want those grazers up there, their opinions on the relationship between herd size and animal performance. Like specifically weight gains. So are you finding that there's a herd size that maximizes animal performance over the course of the grazing season? Or is there a herd size that gets too big? Or is there a sweet spot in respect to the herd size?
I actually don't know, because the largest groups that I've ran 950 yearlings. So I can't really answer that, because I haven't seen any issue below that. But again, I've tapped out so far, you know, at about 900 animals. So I'm not sure if that doesn't really answer your question, but anything below that, I haven't seen. What I have found that really affects performance is grazing in the sweet spot. You know, and I paid for it early on with limited performance.
Yeah, I was gonna struggle a bit with that question. I can kind of go from a different perspective and then having a too small of a herd and in the cow calf scenario, just breaking them down into individual bulls. And I understand that people will be doing that for different reasons, but that one burnt us quite a few years ago now, where we were experimenting with how big of a herd we wanted to run, and it actually caused we ran one group of cows and was on a smaller pasture, and so that was great, and one bull with them, and then that bull turned out to be a dud, and we come back into preg checking, and it was just like the vet's just calling them open, and it's like, what the heck? And so you look and start working it back to what's the problem, and you know, at that time I can't even really speak to what that cost the operation, but I could fast forward it to today. And you look at the depreciation that hit would have cost us, it's massive, right? The difference between an open and a bred, we'll just use it at a $1,000 difference, and on 35 cows, that's $35,000. So that kind of cemented it. We do not run one bull alone ever. I guess we do that with our heifers, but that's a little bit different story. But as far as cow calf pairs, there are always at least two bulls in that situation. And as far as weight gain goes, I think there's a lot of variability in it all. And I think that stockmanship also plays a part of that. I know, like last year when I split, because I ran trader heifers and a bunch of steers together, and then when we sold the heifers, sorry, we sorted them off, and there was like a couple left, and they were lonely. Like I actually kind of felt bad for her. There was one that got sorted back off out of the group, and she just stood there by the pen looking for her friends, basically. So the whole animal mentality can weigh into all of that as well. So I think if you settle them and get them trained to think like as a herd and move as a unit, I think it really that has an effect more than a herd size. But that's just my opinion. I haven't really experimented much with that.
I had a conversation this morning with Clayton. We were talking about herd size there. That might be give Ryan an answer.
Okay, I'm Clayton Brialt, ranch north of St. Rose. We run a fairly large herd of cows. We breed about 2,500 females, calve about 2,000 cows. And kind of what we've found, we don't start calving till 1st of June, but the smaller the herd is, the better survival rate we have. and the heavier the calves. Like we got some herds that we would calve 600 cows in a group. And our smallest herd would be like 80 cows. And those 80 cows, those calves very easily will weigh 80 pounds heavier than the ones in the big group. Just because of the competition and the health of the calves, and as far as scours goes and stuff, we have most of our problems in the bigger groups. And just the calf survival is quite a bit higher in the smaller groups than from the larger groups. I don't know if that helps at all or not.
And then
but-
sort what, where's this, the cutoff sort of?
like, where's the cutoff? I don't know. Couple, 200-300 cows. It seems like when we get up into them 500-600 cows in a group, because what happens in July, we get these real hot days and we got heavy fly load up there. Those cows want a bunch. Like they've got lots of room to move, but you'll have 600 cows and 600 calves all just jammed in a corner. Like they're trying to get away from the bugs and stuff. And we can have scour problems with that and stuff too. But so when you just have 100 cows together, it's just a smaller herd. I think it's just nature's way of saying, I'm overpopulated, so we got to reduce the herd numbers. So you start getting sickness in there. That's just what we've found in the past.
I was gonna say one is too big if you own it, and 900 is perfect if someone else owns them, but.
Thanks, Clayton. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, awesome job, all of you guys, Michael, Rob, Tom, and Michael Thiele. Thank you for jumping in and keeping, it just added huge value to this learned panel. So big round of applause for these four, please.
Oh, I got nothing.